we can start through the eds. Okay,
We are.
we are live. This is Senate Finance. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bills to get out of here. We got one this morning. We got out 2 at lunchtime. We have an amendment. If, when the tax commissioner is available, we will have Tim in. Is there anybody that's crunched numbers about what this would do to schools? I'm having the same feeling I did with Representative. Next thing is that there's a lot of good things, but I don't know how to deal with it unless we can hear the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And that's part of the amendment that I got, it's got some of it, I think representative that stuff attached to it.
Yes.
They have the same problem with that, whether we have to strip it out or not.
And we've got to have it done by the time we go back up there, which, yeah, makes it hard.
So we gonna hear any testimony about Brigham?
Brigham, we have a proposal to do a cap thing on it. Okay, a cap, we don't, and I think it says working towards going to an education or foundation formula payment by 2027. If we decide to do that, we will take testimony from Brigham. I will leave it to you to find somebody that can be here by 4:30 to give us that testimony. Because that's the problem I'm up against. I've got to get some testimony. I will leave it to anybody in the audience. I'm not seeing, I've got some educational
From
people.
the Principals Association or superintendent.
They are all
And, yeah.
watching. Any one of them can speak to us. Okay? I see Department of Ed is there, so if anyone has anything they would like to say, just let us know. But it's a big proposal. I would like, and I've got Lauren, and we have the professional regulation fee bill. And that's gonna take us a few minutes to go through, so Lauren, what is your bill number?
H 870.
870, okay. And you had a fee increase in, I think, 6 years, you were running in the red, so last year, I believe, maybe it's the year before, we did a fee bill for, this is professional regulation. So the floor is yours, tell us what you're proposing.
Thank you, Senator. My name's Lauren Lehman. I'm General Counsel for the Office of Professional Regulation. For the record, this is actually not a fee bill. Every year, OPR has a housekeeping maintenance bill, and that's what this is before you today. There are a couple.
Is posted, so on our website, so I will get that up.
Great. I have a couple of options. I'd like to know what you all want to hear about today. There's a couple of provisions in this bill that have financial components. So just the financial.
Give us the, like, 10,000 foot, and I don't have yours up here.
It's under Tim Devlin's.
It's under Tim Devlin's. I don't have Tim Devlin either, maybe this is. No, I think this is the right one. I'm not. No, I've got Ted, I don't have Tim, but that may be. My computer prepared. Okay, let's try again. It won't.
I can also, if it's helpful.
Just keep going over it.
Okay.
And. we'll
Would it be
get-
helpful for me to share Tim's?
That would be very helpful. Yeah. No, I found it, okay.
Okay.
Yes,
Check what, so are we looking at the as passed by the House, that means there's a GovOps amendment?
and then there's a GovOps amendment. We're mostly interested in the fees or any financial. Is he helpful?
Yes. Okay. So Lost everybody. So am I sharing the right stuff here? Make sure I'm sharing the right screen and you're not seeing my emails. There we go. Okay, so this is Tim's summary. I think the most the components that relate to funding, there's two. One is with regard to an amendment to 3 VSA 127. It requires that civil penalties for violations of unauthorized practice of regulated professions be put into our professional regulatory fee fund, which is a special fund that that finances OPR. It's where all of our fees go from licensure, et cetera. And typically, there's no requirements for how those funds be used other than to support the regulation of the profession, with this one exception, that civil penalties be used for providing education and training for board members and advisors. We're requesting that this limitation be removed. It is OPR really provides most of the training to our board members and advisors on our own. We do it through our staff members, we do it through our training, we do it through our council at board meetings. Recently, our enforcement unit put on a full day training for board members. So there's really very little cost to that, and we have a need to use those monies in other areas. So we would like to remove that one requirement and allow the civil monies to be just put in this professional fee fund, regulatory fee fund, and used with others.
So this is, everything else goes into the professional regulatory fee fund, except this one, you're saying you do this training in-house, and so you don't need the money for that, but you could use it for other things that are paid out of that fund.
Correct,
Yeah.
Senator, yeah. And it goes to the same fund, it's just has to be tagged for these specific purposes that we don't need it for, so.
Okay,
So that's one component. And then, let me know, hopefully we'll still be able to see this. So the, as passed by the Senate, there was an amendment for, a, scrolling down here, funding structure study. So currently, OPR is funded through that professional regulatory fee fund. Everything is funded through licensing fees. And we would like to take this fall, work with the Joint Fiscal Office to review our current funding structure, as well as consider what other states do and report back for consideration next year on the benefits and challenges of the current funding model and make any recommendations about alternative models that we might have. So those are really the only two fiscally relevant components of the bill. There's other provisions with regard to clarifying the scope of estheticians and permanent cosmetologists and tattooists, as well as some radiology technology provisions, osteopathic provisions, all very policy specific.
so that, okay, where is the second? The second finance thing?
So that's in the Senate amendments.
Amendment, where is that?
He's got the screen ready.
What page?
You can talk to him.
Okay.
That is in the Senate Gov Ops. It was an incident,
Okay, it is, that's where I,
amendment. And it's in, I could put it, it's in, draft 2.1 and also the report from the Senate Gov Ops Committee.
okay, and do you know where it is in there?
Yes, it is the, I believe, amendment number 3.
To see.
Yeah, it's the third amendment. There.
I got to see
So
there before.
I'm gonna
Section,
I
is
can
that
send-
Office of Regulatory Funding Structure Study?
yes,
That's section 18, okay.
yes, it's 18A and third in the incident amendment.
Okay. It's just not labeled what, okay, so they're doing a study with joint fiscal, I assume they talked to joint fiscal. All right. Okay, yeah, actually, I think that's a good thing. Because as we've done all these compacts, you are losing your traditional source of funding, you have fewer people getting exclusively state contracts.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, committee, so we're being asked to allow them to put money from civil fees into the regulatory, their general regulatory fund. Rather than requiring it to be used for training, because they do their training in-house, and this, they could use that money better elsewhere. And I don't know that we need to approve a study. I don't see any appropriation, but they're gonna be looking at other funding models. Because as we've done these, we've noticed, it's 10,000 here and 11,000 there. But pretty soon it adds up to real money. And there's a limit as to how much you can, the more you raise it here, probably the more you're pushing people to sign up for a compact, which are already cheaper than state licensing, so, I do have a form, right? You could do, okay.
You wanna look at the, go out amendment while we're,
I did a quick scan looking for, we
I
do
don't
have
see
it.
any money.
No, at the very end, there is to study, but there's no money, there's no revenue. It's studying how, it's looking at, is there an alternative funding source or way to fund professional regulation?
We're not asking for any money for this, for that study. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, you have a,
Are you, ready for a motion?
I am. Does anybody else have questions? Anything you need to do?
So I would move that Senate Finance report favorably. Each 70, as amended by, Tenant Government Operations. And, I'll give you the members down.
Okay. So, Senator Bray has moved that we report H 870. As presented to us with the appropriation, with the amendment from the Senate Government Operations Committee intact. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Okay, I see that as one.
Thank you so much.
502. Okay, who would like to report this one? Who's not here? I can.
So your pleasure.
Okay, Senator Chittenden will report.
We didn't make any changes, right?
No, and it just allows them to put the money in the general regulatory fund that they don't need for training. And there's a study on future revenue ways to fund professional regulation. Okay, so we've done Michael. Lauren is here, we've done that. We've done Michael. Committee, and saying, do you have that proposal? I sent it to you just now, if you could post it from Eric Fitzpatrick.
You said you sent me something, but I just,
It hasn't come.
what, I don't email.
I forwarded it. There is a proposal.
Eric, it's Patrick just emailed me.
He emailed, Okay, you should have 2 copies. I had a call in to Senator Sears this morning. I didn't reach him, but he has talked to Eric. We asked him to go tell him our concerns with that life estate deed. And I guess what they've agreed, have to take Eric at his word, he has run it by Will Baker. And as he explained it to me coming down the stairs, right now you have 8 years to add, so you pay the property transfer tax up front. If I change my mind and I tear up that deed or the house burns down in year 9, I'm up the creek. I've already paid the property tax and I can't get it back. The proposal, as I understand it, he's on the floor all afternoon or most of it.
I can help you if you need.
Okay, great. You can come up here. And then you can tell me if I understood it. The proposal would be that you take off the 8 years and that you have time up until you claim it. It's good, the tax department just came in. That you take off the 8 years and you can ask for, to have a return of that property transfer tax up until you take possession. Is that right?
Yeah, to put it succinctly, under current law, a person will have 8 years to ask for a refund in the case that the life estate deed is revoked. This would remove the 8 years so that there is no time that we're asking for a refund. You're still paying. You're paying the property, the transfer tax at the time that the interest is conveyed as opposed to the actual property being conveyed. But if it's revoked, there wouldn't be a time limit on getting a refund.
Where you get it back.
And under current law, a person that's exempt, if this, the life estate deed could be revoked after 10 years, tax was paid, and then there's no refund.
Our house could burn down, the old present owner can sell it, mortgage it. It's, so all the risk is on the inheritor or proposed inheritor of the property. Okay. So this is 878. Kirby, have you got something you can share with the committee on the screen? Because I think we need to vote to amend 8.
I did post the amendment.
We did post it, so it is up on the committee page. And we will.
Yeah, I can pull it up, but
Okay, there's this one. So we're
need
striking,
permission to share screen.
we're striking out the 8 years. And just putting at any time after the date of revocation. And you can still, and we haven't changed. But it's not underlined, so. Refund of already part of the tax amount paid. Okay,
Yeah, so
that's present law. Because it's not underlined, right? So
the whole scheme to have a refund is already current law, so it's just amending the parts that limit it to 8 years. And then, so this, on page 2 here, the language that's struck out is what's limiting the refund period. And then the additional language is that a refund could be issued at any time after the date of revocation or revision.
Because there's no limit on the time that these life estate deeds can be issued. I could do it when my grandson was born. And he would be due to inherit the family farm and 500 acres. Okay, but it might be 40 years.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. Commissioner, we've been told Will Baker was here yesterday. The in-hall testimony is that the tax department can live with this. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
For the record, Craig Beaulieu, Tax Commissioner. The can live with this moniker, I would say is accurate. Look, I think there's some concern about record retention. Like, how are we gonna find a tax return from 30 years ago to prove that a refund is due? But the refund, when somebody requests a refund, the onus is on them to prove that it's due. So, we'll do our best to work with them. And I expect that there are probably not gonna be a lot that are revoked after 30 years. So hopefully this is not a common problem.
What we heard was that there's no tax owed if it's a blood relative.
That's right.
So this will be the rare case where someone leaves their property well in advance that of their death to someone who is not a blood relative.
I think that's right. Most enhanced life estates are probably already exempt under existing exemptions.
Okay, committee. Questions? If not, I could use a motion to amend, which is Eric Fitzpatrick's to amend H 878
I just want to make
in
sure.
there, with it's Senator Sears amendment. Dated draft number 1.1 of H 878 5/7/2024 at 10 p.m. 10 p.m. They were working late last night. Later than we did.
I would just say so moved that this. Yeah.
Okay, Senator Bray has moved that we amend H 878 with the language before us. Draft 1.1 dated 7/24 by Eric Fitzpatrick at 10 o'clock p.m. Further discussion, this just does away with the 8 years. It makes, we aren't undoing 20 years of tax precedent, and it would be relatively rare. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. I'm seeing that as 601. Would anyone like to report that? I can. Oh, I need a motion now to approve as amended.
Okay, so we move that we vote out favorably H 878. And so amended.
Senator Bray has moved that we report H 878 as amended. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, say no. I think I'm hearing that as 601. You are going to take that down. Okay, we've only got 5 left. Oh, we've got 2 down. Okay, we only got 4 left. But the tax commissioner is here. Kirby, I think you're involved in this too, but we'll let Commissioner Bolio come up. Commissioner, we've got the proposal to put an allowable growth on, along with an excess spending. We've seen the graph. I think what we don't know is what kind of a percentage growth is that? I guess I have some concerns. There's probably some labor contracts out there. There's probably some that bulk last year, but there's probably some that, like the state contract, it's a 2-year and it has an inflator for the second. And we are pretty sure we're gonna get some more healthcare increases. I'm willing to lay money on the fact that we're going to see some healthcare increases. And so just trying to figure out how much wiggle room would this give schools next year?
Yeah, so
Told it's more complicated.
Craig Bolio, Tax Commissioner, if you would allow me to look at my phone for approximately 30 seconds, I
That would
think I
be
could grab the
fine.
range. I would say at a high level, right, just talking about allowable growth rates in general, I would say two things, right? One, I mean, state government manages those same pressures within sort of our own allowable growth rates when we handle appropriations in the general fund. Two, I would say there's multiple ways you could structure allowable growth rates. One would be sort of a hard cap to say a school budget cannot be more than this allowable growth rate. That is not the version that's in this bill. The version that's in this bill says there's an allowable growth rate, and above that, it hits the excess spending penalty, right? By which there's a penalty for that. So it's not to say you cannot go above that, but there is a penalty for going above that. I have the range, I think, in my email. Joint Fiscal Office also may be able to speak to that, but don't want to put them on the spot, but I had an email from this morning. Right, so among the higher ends, the growth rate is 0 or less than 1%, right? Because it's a formula based on the highest spending district, operating district in the state. I'm seeing the highest growth rate would be 6.5%. Most of them are between 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. They've also the bulk is between
So
1 and
if you're
3%.
one of our lower spending schools on that graph,
Then you get more of an allowable growth rate before you.
well, when we looked at the graph, there seemed to be a bigger spread as you went up, which I was having trouble understanding. But we have some low spendings, and it might just be the optics of the way, maybe Julia could put that up. But if you have a 1% growth rate, and the minute you hit 1.1%, you get hit with it 2 times excess spending.
For the portion that's above that allowable growth rate.
And if your healthcare and already negotiated labor contracts put you up there, all right.
So I'm trying to understand how Brigham affects this, but I
I don't think this
don't
is,
under,
this I don't think does Brigham.
Pardon?
I don't think this touches Brigham.
well, I'm waiting to see the blue and green line and.
Okay,
Or
but
whatever
Julia's
they call
working on
it.
getting that up,
I'm just
That
trying
is
to,
the question.
because this hits all schools equally. It's how much you spend, not how much a penny raises. Arguably, if you're a poorer town, I would bet that most of the towns on that low end are poorer communities.
And the word penalty is being used in describing what would take place.
Well, we put an excess spending penalty on if you spent 16% above the state average, and that's on the graph. You see the green line. That's 116%.
We've had excess spending limits or penalties in the past.
Oh,
That's
Ever
not
since
what's
I've been
being
here.
proposed now.
we, in our bill, have put the excess spending penalty back in. It was taken out in 127 because we didn't want to penalize towns that we were suddenly giving a lot of voting capacity or spending capacity to. If their spending went up, because the idea was it should to provide the services. That's kind of been adjusted in. So. And it may just be the line, okay. So right now, the blue line is our spending curve, that's what's going on. The red line is where that spending curve would be allowed to rise to next year. The minute you went above that red line. Now, anybody down here, anybody on that lower ledge, okay? the minute they went above that red line, they would be hit with an excess spending, a double taxation on the money over
Just the portion.
that portion of it.
So that's, when you're in a certain zip code, you can't move out.
I don't understand.
Well, it's the expression of redlining, was when you're limited, when
We're
zip
not-
codes are.
We are not going into redlining, we've already done that in economic development.
I'm guilty of mixing metaphors, but if you were a low
It's a
spender
band,
and you say, we'd like to come up to be an average spender here in
Yes.
Vermont. You would be, in the words of the witnesses, penalized, and it would cost you twice as much to catch up
yes,
as to someone who had already gotten up there.
yes,
I think Brigham would say that that violates equal access to being like someone else for the same effort.
we've also believe that we go to court, and I'm not sure.
Or would be enjoined, perhaps enjoined from its, when someone look at there, but we don't have any witnesses that.
Aren't we saying
Sure.
though that the economic opportunity payment that is by definition is the amount necessary to provide an adequate education to a
But
child?
we're not doing that this year, so there is no economic opportunity payment. There is,
That's where we're trying to get to. in
that's
terms of a
among the
two-year period.
things under discussion, yeah. That is among the things under discussion, it did not make it out of the other body, and we have had 4 days to deal with it. And can't, we have a study committee. We can choose to do this now without the time to really understand what schools would be hurt. We've already put in the excess spending cap and taken out all the exceptions. We don't know what impact that's going to have because we haven't had time. My assumption is we're gonna start putting them in again and find out what impact it has. But at least we've cleared the boards and we're starting with a clean slate.
What we're trying to do also, Madam Chair, is not create an incentive for additional spending,
Right,
because that's our problem as to why we're here doing what we're doing now, at least for the period of time until we have the long-term plan. And so what this is interim measure, it is not a permanent measure.
And the prohibition penalty on excess spending applies to the schools, the school in the state or the group of schools in the state that are the lowest spenders, that are well behind everyone else. We're going after them.
yeah, that
We're going
little
after-
bottom
Yeah.
one. Would, that's spending 8,000 a year. I think I may have a couple schools in that bottom quartile.
Sure.
I do too.
What is the
How are they different
average?
than the 14,000?
Well, that's what I'm asking, what is the average spending, do we know that? What's the middle? Ed, you know, you can tell me.
Julie, do you know the answer?
I do, am I being asked? I'm not really sure.
One that is the
Yes,
Julie may be able to answer the average. So
Yeah.
okay, what?
Julie Rector, JFO, so using the forecasted FY 25 ed spending data. The statewide average FY 25 ed per pupil spending is 13,294
Okay, 14
per weighted
or
pupil.
weighted people, so 14, I'm gonna assume these are weighted people here.
Yeah, everything that we're looking at here per pupil spending, that you'll recall that technical term, that's the education spending divided by long-term weighted average daily membership.
So we've got 14 and you can see where it's about a little better than halfway up. The top one is at 18. So we've got some between 14, a little less than half, I think, between 14 and 18.
three concerns with your proposal. One of them being, I wish we'd seen this a few weeks ago, but the other three is, small schools with low per pupil spending can have huge swings in student bodies, creating uncontrollable volatility, where I think that this tied to additional threshold will just, I don't have it, I can't anticipate how problematic that could be for those small districts. And as for the large districts that I represent in my district, I have 4 school districts and they're all operating at scale. They are reeling from the pupil weights, and I'm just worried that this, if they are already executing a plan to adjust accordingly, that this could further shoot them in the foot, causing them even more grief. But the last concern, I would just echo Senator McDonald's, is that the Brigham, I do feel that if you're down here, and these schools want to get to spend as much as these are per pupil, this will penalize them from doing so, which I think runs head into the Brigham constraint, which is equal access to equitable funding for their schools. So those are my concerns and why I don't think I can support it today. I love the creativity and I wish we'd gotten it a few weeks ago. But
We can always obviously tweak it, needless to say.
Yeah.
Give it the luxury of time,
Well, we've got
put controls in to
45
make those
minutes
issues from.
and 4 bills. And I'd like not to have you back here until 9 o'clock tonight, because we don't do our best work at 9 o'clock. And I
Wonder if the
think
commissioner has any further comment though relative to this.
On allowable growth rates, I guess I would have a few things for consideration. I mean, one, the legislature has passed allowable growth rates before. They didn't ultimately go into effect, but they have been passed. I agree with Senator Brock, right, that Senator Brock's amendment uses these for 2 years until the formula change for economic opportunity payments is put in. So it's really sort of a temporary bridge until you build the permanent bridge. I think the concern with just using the excess spending threshold, right? When I testified, I think it was last week, on some of the challenges with incentives under the current formula, right? You still have, most districts are gonna have a real advantage to sitting just under that excess spending threshold. That's where you get the cheapest dollars and you push more spending of yours onto those lower spending districts. And I think, I will say, the excess spending threshold traditionally was one of the few bright line cost containment provisions in the education fund. And it did its job in that way, and that you would see a number of districts every year sitting right under that. But that's still an advantage for those districts who are spending above the average. And they're sort of already penalizing, for lack of a better word, those lower spending districts. They're getting more of that pushed onto them. They're getting an artificially high yield. So that's one of the concerns with just using the excess spending threshold. There may be an opportunity. I know that this committee lowered it from the House's proposal. Maybe there's an opportunity to be more aggressive there that would help offset some of that concern. I don't have this data, but I think an important question to ask is just how, like, traditionally, how many of those lower spending districts have wanted to jump up significant amounts year over year, right? I hear the concern that maybe they're not allowed to, but again, if you've got other districts who are going to be allowed to jump up more using just the excess spending threshold, they're going to be pushing more costs onto those lower districts. If those other lower spending districts otherwise did not have a desire to be a higher spending district, then the allowable growth rate might not necessarily hurt them, but would help prevent other districts from pushing more spending onto them. Again, I don't have that data with me, but I think it's an important question.
I think that's an,
What difference is?
we've always
Well,
had
it's
this,
free.
we've always had this issue that, and we've known for a few years that this is our new equity, that the issue, that it is easier, and I'm not sure it's easier, some of those top ones may be very small, but somewhat poor schools, I don't know. But it is generally easier for towns where the average wealth is higher to pass school budgets or increase school budgets than towns where the average wealth is lower. And we were hoping that Brigham would bring up those schools. I had the pleasure, I guess you'd call it, of touring some of those schools pre-Brigham. We didn't see the worst, and I would say they were not places I would want to send my children to educate. And some of those have deteriorated for 20 years. And in some ways, we haven't a penny on the tax rate raises the same amount of money per student. But it is easier for some towns to afford that penny than others. This would, even if those schools wanted to go up. What if in August, the school I know about actually does pass the $700,000 bond to fix their roof that's leaking, that's been leaking for 13 years? Is that bond's gonna come after July of 24? So they're gonna get, you know what, with this, it's those kinds of questions. We just, I don't know. And I think if we put the excess spending, the House backed off it for some reason, the education thing. We haven't had time other than have Representative Beck come in and share his thoughts. We haven't looked into it, so to do anything that assumes that we're going to do that, I think limits our committee that's supposed to be looking at all the data and deciding what the solution should be, that would prejudice it definitely. Well, you've already voted to do this, so and I don't want to do that with, maybe we've had 45 minutes. I just,
That's the difficulty, Madam Chair. The problem that we have, of course, is we have a huge problem that's affecting every taxpayer in Vermont.
Right.
And as they look at a double-digit increase in property taxes, the concern is what are we doing to ensure that there isn't another double-digit increase in taxes next year and the year after and the year after? We place our reliance on a committee that's formed with no specific defined range of goals in mind that actually accomplishes what we need in order to ensure that we don't have this next year. And what this is designed to do is not necessarily solve the problem permanently, but to say, we've got to do something right now for a limited period of time to keep costs down. And I haven't seen anything else proposed that does that.
well, we have another little kink in here. We have local control. The state does not control education spending. The voters do. And the voters are voting the double-digit increases. We haven't had time to do that because we just have a lot of other things out there we have to do. And the Ed Committee hasn't spent any time on it. They're focused on quality education, but not the affordability. So I don't know what we're gonna do.
To Senator Brock's point, I agree that the yield bill could have done more to address the spending and the costs that are really driving this equation or this conversation. But the two things that it does do that I think are important is it does have an excess spending threshold at the lowest point it's ever been at 116%. And that's why I do support our amendment that is asking for for a group of individuals from the tax commission, from the Agency of Education to spend July to December to develop legislation on 10 areas of possible cost control measures that the state could take next legislative session. I feel like this year, the yield bill is where it is, and that body that we have put forward as an amendment will generate a lot more options that'll be well considered and vetted for the next legislature to consider. That's all.
Okay.
So anything else to add?
Like, I guess just one perspective I would offer, right, on the educational opportunity payments, it has check back provisions in, right? So there are contingent effective dates in there. So another perspective would be that maybe we would help give direction to that committee and help flesh that idea out more. The administration does think that that's a really intriguing idea. If the committee the Education Finance Committee that this committee put in their amendment ultimately decides that that's not useful, then you don't have to pass the things that are in the contingent effective dates. And if I could also just add two other things on other sections of the bill, I would just put in one more plug for that additional sentence on the ballot language to say school district tax rates are based on per pupil spending. That's in section 9. We passed that, right?
That got passed out on Friday.
That did not get added to the bill, but I thought the committee seemed interested in it.
I thought we had done that.
So I would just add, I have not seen that added to the bill, but would
Didn't add
encourage that.
All right,
We didn't receive direction for that.
And then it's not clear to me all the studies that the bill is creating, but I think there are at least two.
There's-
And then there's another, the Ed Advisory Study Committee in section 11,
yeah,
which is an annual thing for 10 years on top of the other things. I'm really struggling to see the value of that, and I am seeing huge workload challenges with the tax department, agency of education, and joint fiscal office, who all do the December 1 letter work around that time, and are then gonna be asked on December 15th of every year to do a bunch of other charges that
okay. I think,
I would really love that to go away.
What's that?
I think we were trying, we'd like to get this bill out of here this year. Another reason the yield is on it. We were trying. We couldn't come to a decision on Friday night about the studies. That one doesn't start until 25, so as we move forward with working on the financial structure of our schools, then it's July of 25 or April of 25, but we thought whichever committee put it in would have time to change their minds.
So Madam Chair, I'm happy to be corrected, but my understanding is that the committee in section 11 starts on July of 2024. I think the committee in section 1 might be 2025.
Well, we're still gonna fight that out on the floor. The Commission on Education, we moved to 25. I remember, I don't have my copies passed by the House, but again, it was 8:30, 9 o'clock on Friday. So I can't guarantee it, but I thought I saw 25.
Okay,
It is what?
am I looking at a wrong draft?
This is section 11 as passed by the House. Yes, C
Goes out on
225.
24.
Alright.
Yeah,
Double
it
check.
needed to occur
Section
before
11,
July
Education Fund Advisory
2025.
Committee.
Okay, Commissioner, it's on page 20. And it says you're gonna call the first meeting to occur before July 15th, 2025.
Okay,
So if you don't call the meeting at all, I don't know what.
I see what you're saying. It's effective July of 24, but
Yeah,
okay.
which will give us, it will give whoever's idea that was time to rethink it. Or.
You could always just strike it.
We're trying not to upset people. I can't believe how upset people are because we're moving the Commission on the Future of Education out a year so we can study the, how we're gonna deal with finances. Because I think we all know just sticking spending caps on there isn't gonna work. It's structured. Ken, yes, just introduce yourself to the rest.
Ted Fisher, the record Ted Fisher, Vermont Agency of Education, and the agency's Director of Policy Strategy and Outreach. Appreciate the opportunity to jump in and do my poor attempt to follow up Commissioner Bolio. The agency would just like to associate itself with many of the same points the commissioner just said and urge action on this amendment this session. I think one of the things we think about a lot is the urgency of the moment, and I recognize that it seems like there's good intent among all the parties to come back next year. But also we're looking at multiple committees that there's uncertainty there in terms of we watch many committees not necessarily be able to solve the problem. I think, and I've been doing this work for a little while at AOE. I personally, but also from our perspective, some of the proposals in terms of the education opportunity payments are really interesting for the reasons that I think you've been talking a little bit here, but this committee knows well. almost as a follow-up to Act 127, which is that we really have, and I've started to think about it this way a lot this session, we really have two Vermont education systems. And those are the two education systems we tried to address and did work to address in terms of the equity of the weights in Act 127. We're seeing patterns, starting to see patterns where some of the districts that were formerly, I was struggling for the word, formerly had less tax capacity than they should have had. We're not seeing them increase their education spending as much as we would
Because we
like to
didn't
see.
mandate that they couldn't
Instead,
use.
they're in the same as all Vermonters dealing with a situation of rising costs.
Yeah.
And they are struggling to pass budgets, not all of them, but some of them are struggling to pass budgets. Or they are setting budgets that are still lower than they should be spending. In order to catch up and to continue to provide, and we're watching our costs increase while our outcomes decrease. And I think this gets framed in this building as it's either a tax policy and a cost of living or a cost of local communities issue, or gets framed as an education issue. And from our perspective, they're one and the same. The system and the funding system we have is not good for students, and it is not good for teachers, and it is not good for our administrative and support staff, and it's not good for our communities. And so, while I recognize that there's a commitment and you have really been shortchanged insofar as you're receiving this at the very end of the session with a timeline,
This is our sixth.
we would like to see and ask that you consider putting some of this framework into law with the understanding that you have a large number of groups that can bring forth amendments to that process
Okay.
in the future.
You
We-
want us to put into law an education opportunity payment without, I have a half an hour, without ever having taken any testimony on it. I was part of the discussions that went on before the proposal was brought forward. But I have never seen the PICUS report. I have a general idea of what it said. The other body failed to do it. I understand there was some severe opposition from some people in this room. And again, I don't know, this committee doesn't know, and we are not the education committee, what the impact of that would be across the board in schools. It could hurt the struggling schools. I'm familiar with one of them that is having exactly that problem. They are a winner and they can't pass their budgets. They've gone down twice. They're a poor community with a good sized school. I don't know why the other body had this built for 4 months. We got it less than 10 days ago. And we have spent all of last week on it and as much time as we can spend this week. But to enact something before we've had time to crunch the numbers and know it's going to work and that it's going to have time. I'll be lucky if we can get off the floor with our finance intact, our finance study, without having the future education, what do they call themselves, commission, either put in at the same time or starting before we can even get working on legislation like this next year when we've had the ability to spend a number of days working on it. I'm not sure how I'm gonna pay for my taxes, and they're going on, I live in Montpelier, between the flood and the school, we're all getting hit. And I know I can't sustain it. I can't sustain it as a new base. And I know there's no place for me to move in the state of Vermont. So, and I'm not alone.
With your permission, Madam Chair, I think you've outlined many of the challenges, and I absolutely understand the impossible position the committee has been put in, and we are very grateful to your work, particularly to put forward a more concrete commission to bring on a quicker timeline things for next year. That is very valuable and we appreciate that. I think we just could not let the opportunity, we could not pass up this opportunity to indicate how critical we think this is and how urgent it is, and express our worry with all due respect to all of you, because I expect to see many of you again next biennium here with a commitment to do so. But we will have a new legislature and we will have different challenges and other things, and maybe that's a good thing, but we maybe we'll leave it at that.
Well, I guess one question that I would raise right now is, if I look at this amendment and I hear the discussion, and again, I've spoken with people in other committees as well. I don't see a particular will or desire of anyone here that I've spoken to or heard from so far to enact this, even in fact, we took out the piece regarding the caps and spending. I have not seen any groundswell of interest in enacting something here. Am I reading that correctly?
Cap and spending or just a empty?
The cap on spending, because that effectively is a cap by saying that the excess penalty will kick in and that serves as a cap.
You could move
Yeah.
the excess spending penalty down below where we moved it to hit more schools. I don't know what that means to schools.
That's the problem is, again, the time frame that we have right now, we've got less than half an hour based on a bill that we have had, for an infinitesimal period of time compared to what the bill was in the other boundaries. So we had nothing to look at. And again, without testimony, I'm just concerned that I just don't get a sense that there's particular appetite for doing any of the other items that are in here, or are there?
Watching the pressure schools are under right now with their budgets going down. I'm not sure how much capacity they have to lower their budgets. I don't think that schools are in a spending spree, and we definitely don't seem to be getting Ivy League results. Even if some of our schools are spending at Ivy League levels, I think we know.
Well, the issue is not necessarily that they might be spending. The issue is to prevent, or at least serve as a control for an excess amount, a truly excess, and I use that in the generic term rather than in the defined term, spending as we're going into these next 2 years. So again, we're not back here again in the same way next year than we are this year.
We're gonna be back here.
Or any worse that
Committee,
way.
I've got 4 other bills and we're gonna be back here tonight. And I know somebody's got a dinner if we're off the floor. So I am not sensing a will to move forward on this in this time frame at this.
Well, there is the one opportunity potentially, because if there is a veto to the yield bill, which I would anticipate, if the veto were sustained, you have a period of time between the veto and coming back for a veto session to perhaps address some of the issues in a perhaps more holistic and.
If things go the way they normally go, after a veto, there will be a negotiating session. And I'm not sure who will be involved in the negotiations. Sometimes we are and sometimes we aren't. But a threat of a negotiation is, the veto is not enough to make me do a bill that I don't feel I know what will happen if I do it. I mean, I have to, in good conscience, I may be wrong, but I need to at least know somewhere that I know what will happen.
We, started talking maybe 6 weeks ago about how not to be in the same place.
Yes.
One thing, I don't know that. It is, troubling for everyone when we have the sort of 4 months, 4 days paradigm. And although tax bills have to originate in the House, it makes me wonder why we sort of informally explore the yield concept on our own, so that by the time something arrives, we're among the 2 or 3 into a discussion and have well-formed counter proposals to bring to you.
We started a couple times. And then we've had other issues, so we will,
I mean,
next year, we will have proposed
But we do it
legislation.
for next year.
Yeah.
It might be the 4th thing.
We will have proposed legislation to start working on next year. That's the outcome of the commission. The other question that I've been asked is, do we really want to add 2 members? Or do we want to specify that 2 members come from the education and finance committees? So that we just have a larger number? That's,
I agree with that,
you agree with that?
yes.
Is that acceptable? So
That's St. James Office of Legislative Counsel. Which study are you talking about?
ours, the
Finance.
finance study.
So,
We asked you to do 2 members. Can we do 2 additional members from this? We'd have to,
One for each body.
1 from each body.
so right now,
Got,
you have, bear with me.
That's 6 right now.
You have
4 legislators.
I think you're right, like every.
Structure.
4 legislators, 1 from the Education Committee, 1 from Ways and Means, 1 from the Education Committee, 1 from Finance. I've already drafted an amendment to add 2 at-large members, so that would bring the total to 6. Are you looking for an additional amendment?
We are looking for a change to that amendment saying that they would be from either the education or the finance committee.
So no longer at large.
No longer at large. I keep this into the committees that have been doing some work on it and that have some staying power.
Well, especially on a complicated issue, if you have people on a working group foreign to any jurisdiction. It's pretty hard for them.
Yeah. Okay, so I can offer that upstairs. I would like. Mr. Novogratski is here. We had him here yesterday. We canceled him 3 times. And I'd like to try and get through 1 or 2 more bills.
I'm sure we spend more time talking about how much time we don't have and less time talking about what we're supposed to be talking about.
Okay, what would you like to talk about?
The bill we have before us, the gentleman from the Department of Education lamented that the lower spending schools are failing to meet their obligations to spend enough money to deal with their kids.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did I mischaracterize your comment?
Senator, we have just decided not to support the amendment. So we made a
What are we gonna
decision.
do?
Right now, what would you like us to do?
Appoint a committee that's balanced on the political
That's,
spectrum.
I think
Yeah.
that's what we just decided to do. We are adding 2 more legislative members.
And the instructions that go with those 2 members are,
To provide as
no,
far
no,
as,
as far as political balance.
if you would give me 1 minute, I'll tell you. Beth can read it to you. It says, with as much consideration as possible to party affiliation.
That's for the first 4 members. The next 2
No.
members. All 6 of them,
All 6 of them.
and forgive my analogy, but Las Vegas will tell you you're gonna get twice you're gonna get an unbalanced
What
number.
do you want to do, Senator?
Have the committee that's gonna look into this be balanced.
That's, you want me to tell the governor who he can appoint?
We know who the governor's gonna appoint.
Yeah. And
it's
you're
gonna
assuming
end
you know
up
their
that-
party affiliation, right?
And I do.
You do?
Madam Chair, the current language that we're talking about amending will result in a 4-2 vote on those issues.
What do you? Okay. But we have 6 people. We have traditionally said 1 from each party.
Yes,
Okay. Right now, we say as much as possible. Do you want us to say in law that everybody is to be from the Democratic Party?
No more than I would want it to say everything from the Republican Party.
Then what do you want it to say?
I want to. Add to what is currently in the language. 2 additional members from the legislature, 1 House, 1 Senate. At the discretion of the Speaker and the Committee on Committees.
That's what we said, only we want them to be from either the education or one of the money committees. That's what's on there.
Go ahead. I'm fine.
Okay,
Well,
we are going on to our bills. Mr. Novogrodsky, come on up.
we're switching bills.
Yes. And I may just go home and we won't deal with your bill today unless you'd like to present it, Senator. That is my ultimate threat.
Now, moving on.
Chair, donation principle, I'm sure you can do your things.
I still haven't figured out what you think I'm doing wrong. And then you could ask me if I do. Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
What bill are you here for? Behind you.
Yeah, good morning, Madam Chair. I'm here, my name is Ben Obrowski from the Office of Legislative Counsel here to discuss H 645 entitled an act relating to the expansion of approaches to restorative justice. And that's a hard act to follow. So I'm
You're right.
gonna do my best. So it's.
Got really quiet. I guess no one cares about me.
It's the effect I tend to have. This was a 60-page bill, but the portion that concerns this committee is one provision that is on page 34, lines 3 through 8.
And that is posted, it is on our website.
Yes, and to summarize that provision for the committee, what this bill does is create a pre-charge diversion program for both juveniles and adults that would be administered by the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office currently has a diversion program, but it is a post-charge diversion program.
Okay, this would be, my husband spent over 10 years on the diversion board.
Okay.
How does this mesh with the diversion program? That's post-charge, right?
Correct, yeah, you have to be, a charge has to be filed and you have to be arraigned.
And it started with juveniles.
Right, and that currently exists under law now for adults. What this does is expand the program so that there can be referrals from prosecutors and law enforcement prior to a charge being filed. For offenses that are listed on a policy adopted by each county state's attorney. And that policy will outline what the process is essentially, to provide transparency, but also to, they still retain final discretion ultimately on the offenses that are referred. So that is a very short version of what the concept is.
So we're expanding diversion.
Correct.
But adding that it's pre-charge.
Correct.
So if I pick you up and now you get charged, you go to diversion and the charge goes away or it's.
Well, you wouldn't be charged yet, but there are provisions contemplated that if someone is not an appropriate fit for diversion after talking with the restorative justice providers, or if they fail to complete the diversion programming, the referral can essentially be kicked back to the prosecutor or law enforcement for further action.
Okay.
Money, exactly. So under the current program, there is a mandate to charge fees. For juveniles, those fees are currently no more than $150. For adults, I believe it's $300 as well. In reality, juveniles are not charged fees.
under the current program. And what this bill does in that specific provision on page 34, lines 3 through 8, is that, and this is in the adult portion, is that these mandated fees are now discretionary. And they would,
If you're poor and you don't have $300, it can be waived.
right, and then also there's, program officers and employees can determine any fees that are levied based on the financial capabilities of the participant, and in no instance shall those fees exceed $300. The mandate in the juvenile portion has since been struck in this bill, so there will be no fees for juveniles. And so that is really the change from a fee perspective that this
And
bill.
I don't have anybody from joint fiscal here. Does anyone know if there was a fiscal note?
There was, and this is Willa Farrell from the Attorney General's office, who can probably supplement some of my testimony.
Rolled for with the version.
Right, but my understanding is that this would be a de minimis impact, given the
That's what
fact
I'm-
that most of you charge now.
In order to make it accessible
Correct.
to poor people. I
I believe Scott from JFO's next door.
got JFOs.
And he's yeah, if you want.
Okay, yes, you can come over.
I do have a fiscal note
Oh, you have
here,
it, fine.
and I can,
It's also on me.
It's on the committee page, so we don't need Scott.
right, so, as far as the fees, this concerns fiscal impacts, some of which are beyond the jurisdiction of this committee, regarding appropriations, but, there is also in section 1, you'll see at the bottom of the first page, the fiscal note that amends 3 VSA chapter 7. Current law states that diversion participants must pay a fee not to exceed $150 for juveniles, $300 for adults, as I stated. The changes largely reflect current practice. So as of July 1st of 23, no fee is charged to youth or adults referred to court diversion from the family division, or adults participating in the DLS program. That's a driver license suspension program. Program directors have noted that changing demographics of participants, most of whom earn low rate wages and struggle with other financial challenges. And the data collected last year shows that approximately a quarter of diversion participants, paid the full fee amount. Approximately a quarter paid a reduced fee, and over a half paid no fee. In total, $161,380 was collected in fee revenue in fiscal year 23. To account for the loss in special fund revenue as a result of the change, $54,000 was added to the FY 24 Fort Diversion base budget in Act 78 of 23. So that's really the fee portion in its effect.
Okay, well, think I'm reading here is in total, they collected $161,380, so that's probably the most they would lose if they didn't collect any of it.
Correct.
And they can still, if you can pay, they will, but
Perfect.
are forced back into court because you don't have. Committee. Dr. Fred.
So, did we look at the judiciary amendment or any?
Just reading the fiscal note.
Excuse me, sir, I didn't hear.
I'm sorry. There was a proposal amendment from judiciary. I just want to make sure before we went on to voting that if there's a fiscal impact in that amendment, we didn't finish that.
No, that is a subset, well, yes, it's a substantive amendment, and then it doesn't affect the fiscal aspects of the bill.
Okay. Yeah, I'm taking it in there.
There's no further discussion. I will move the Senate Finance report favorably H 645 as amended by the Committee on Judiciary.
Dr. Gray, where does my client? Okay, so the sign. Senator Gray has moved that we report draft report. No, I think I'm on the amendment. Make sure I'm on the.
Yeah,
Okay.
as passed.
Yes, as Well, I think we're passing it as amended by the Senate,
Right.
okay?
Well, yeah, it would be draft 2.1.
And so I'm back to that amendment, okay, draft 2.1.
You sure it's not three
I've
one?
got
Oh, it's a
3.1.
3, I'm sorry.
I've got 3.1, dated 5/1/2024,
Oh, wait.
below 8, okay? This is a strike all amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Sure we didn't lose anything. Okay. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. I'm seeing that 601. I can. Did you take the last
I did.
one I was gonna?
Take all you want.
I can do it.
Here it comes.
Okay. All right, what's next then? We just did 645. 8:10. I was waiting for director on that one.
It's on your
It's
finish.
on there, okay.
Was on Michelle and Tim both have to.
We have Michelle and Tim, they are here for,
I'm here for cannabis.
again, just let's go through that.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Let's
you're
do
doing
that.
H55 next week, so we might not wait. If that have H certificate.
I think it might be in trouble in that also.
Veggie's what's in trouble, not the rest.
I told him we'll pass it if we'll get H10 out of the lawyers deal with what happens if they both have, they both say the same thing and it's the same. All right, Michelle, canvas.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So for the record, Michelle Childs, Office of Legislative Counsel, and I'm going to be talking to you about H612. I'm first going to take a look at the House version of the bill because there are a number of fees in there that have not been amended by Senate Economic Development, so I'll just buzz through those quickly. And then there is one section in the Senate Economic Development Amendment that you might want to take a look at. Okay, if I can do it. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we're looking at the House passed version. So the first amendment is in section 6 of the House passed version. So the underlying bill creates what's called a medical endorsement for cannabis retailers. So you have the medical system and you have dispensaries that sell to registered patients and caregivers. You have the retail system that sells to adults 21 years of age and older. And so section 6 is the fee for a retailer who goes through the process and complies with the statutory requirements and the guidelines that are to be adopted by the board. Or if you're going to be a retailer that has a medical use endorsement to essentially serve medical patients under those types of conditions. And so you'll see that the current retailer fee is $10,000. And then at the top of page 12, it increases to $10,250 if you get the additional medical endorsement. So it doesn't increase to $250
To get the medical.
to get the medical endorsement if they do that. So the next changes are to the medical system and the registration fees. So section 8 is addressing the issue of the fee that patients have to pay to be on the registry. And right now, you'll see that the registration card expires 1 year after the date of issuance for patients who are on the registry because of their qualifying medical condition is chronic pain. Otherwise, patients who are on there for something like MS or cancer only have to go through that renewal every 3 years. And this amendment changes it so that it would be for everybody who is a qualified patient, they would only have to renew every 3 years and pay that $50 registration fee.
So we're not changing the fee, right? We're just changing.
Exactly, the frequency.
That would have an impact.
Right, the frequency just because it's right now, it's only folks with chronic pain who have to do it on an annual basis. So the next change is on section 9, and these are fees for dispensaries. I'm sure many of you have heard that the board is really trying to sustain the medical program, and they've had dwindling numbers of patients. There's just a few dispensaries that are currently serving patients, which is why the board proposed allowing retailers to have a medical endorsement. This proposal reduces the fees for those medical dispensaries. So you might recall, I know Senator Cummings, you were here when we put this all in place many years ago. And the fees are rather high for dispensaries, especially compared to what you have in the retail system now. And so you'll see that the proposal here is reducing the fees for dispensaries. Instead of a $2,500 application fee, it would be $1,000. The annual renewal fee would drop to $5,000 from a current $25,000. And I don't know if you asked anybody from Joint Fiscal on this, but I think there is a fiscal note on this when it was in the House. And again, these haven't been changed in the Senate version.
I don't
Usually
see anybody here to doing fiscal.
When I'm out of the witness chair, I can try to find it on the webpage and send it to Zane.
It's on the committee page.
It's on the committee page, okay.
The next change is on section 11. Actually, that's.
We've got the yield bill that's up first up there, so we're gonna have to go. I'm gonna have.
Do you want me to stop?
They can't start without us, that is true.
So section 10, there's just enabling legislation for the board to charge and collect fees for reviewing advertisements, because all advertisements that are put out by a retailer have to go for prior review prior to publication. The board does not charge fees, and so they just ask that this be repealed.
Okay.
Then there's two sections that are in here, and this section 13 having to do with the excise tax, and section 14 having to do with the sales tax. So right now, and it's not changed by this, is that if you are going under the medical program and you're receiving cannabis and cannabis products, those are not subject to the excise tax and the sales tax. But if you go through the retail, they are. And this language is just verifying that if a retailer is making a sale to a registered patient and they have a medical endorsement, that they would sell those cannabis and cannabis products tax-free.
Okay.
So that's, and then I just have one other thing, and then
because that was gonna be coming through that board and
and this is in the Senate Economic Development Amendment. Section, there's a new section 15A that's developed. So, and this is creating the Cannabis Social Equity Working Group for the purpose of making recommendations to the General Assembly regarding the percentage of the cannabis excise tax that should be appropriate to the Cannabis Business Development Fund. And that's a fund that you created that's administered by ACCD to be issuing grants and loans and training and support for social entities. Pardon?
I said they don't want to do it.
But there it is. So that's all I've got.
Committee. Senator Gray.
So the fiscal note is actually updated to today's date.
It is.
Yep.
Oh, wow, great.
And so, we have a pair of amendments. I don't know. So, I would move that the Senate Finance report favorably 8612 as amended by
I think it's presented to us.
Economic development. There. And it's there. Sorry. That's the only, that's the reason.
Okay. Senator Gray has moved approval. We're looking specifically at the fees, so some changes in fees. Is there any further discussion?
Madam Chair, I just want to note for people around the room, we had talked about another amendment that I can introduce on the floor in the interest of moving this. That isn't germane to this committee.
Okay.
It was another issue that the House asked us to fix in the bill. So I just, for anyone paying attention, I haven't
Just
forgotten.
looking at the fees, and I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's played with those, okay. Further discussion, if not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. That motion carries. Who would like to report this one?
And do that.
Okay, that's right, yeah. Okay, good. Then we'll all head upstairs.
And the committee sent us the bill.